we're going to kick off, and I'd like to, again, welcome you all here. Tessa, let me start with you. What do we make of all of this VAT chaos?
Wow, you want to start with the VAT chaos?
Oh, yes.
So, this morning when I started my Power Breakfast show from 6 to 9 on Power FM on 98.7.
Okay, we'll allow it.
So this morning when I started my show, after a week of talking to all sorts of politicians and everybody, wanting to get in their slice of who got the right shots in, who did the right things at the right time from the political front, I said that for me, this is a victory for South Africans in the voters actually caused all of this, right? So in the 2024 election, voters need to realize that what you did is force politicians to work together in an unprecedented way. And I think that is my favorite thing about this outcome, right? In 2018, we had a VAT hike. We almost forget that we had a VAT hike in 2018 because like every other budget that has passed under a majority ANC government, it came from Luthuli House, it went into cabinet, and it got passed through Parliament without us even knowing what the debates were. We didn't know which parties were for or against. There was no, and the budget has had this problem all the way through. So I'm famous for always saying that I don't take SONA seriously. It's ceremonial, it's about pomp and ceremony. Nobody votes on SONA. But the budget is this big deal that we've never as South Africans really gotten a full look at. The media industry is not...
Please just turn the music down in the monitors here, guys. Yeah.
The media space has not covered the budget in the kind of detail that we've seen. That's why most journalists don't know what questions to ask about the budget right now, don't know how this process is supposed to unfold. And I think this is such a big victory because the reason we are here, and we can say, well, the DA was extorting, grandstanding, or whatever it is that they were doing. But they saw the opportunity that said, the ANC can't just pass this on their own terms anymore. And that was caused because the voters said, the ANC, nobody can have a full-out majority, and everybody's going to have to do the work. The second big gift that we've given ourselves is we are forcing parliamentarians to work. My friend Lukwana Mnguni is here. There's nobody who has trolled parliamentarians more than Lukwana Mnguni has. He knows their names, their numbers, he knows their email addresses. And there was 1 week when we were doing electoral reform work and Parliament was about to pass a law that was going to change the way we voted. And we were sending them videos to explain the law that they were about to vote for the next day. Do you know how many parliamentarians called us back and said, please explain? The next day. And that's because Parliament has not been a place and a real site of struggle until right now. And so us forcing parliamentarians to actually do their jobs, well done, South Africa.
Absolutely.
Well, I think to not recap what Tessa has covered, but by the way, yesterday I was at Exclusive Books and somebody told me they just finished reading Colored. And I thought, wow, Tessa is making an impact. It was a teenage boy, 16.
Oh, that's so cool.
So they were asking me for book recommendations and they pointed yours out and said, no, I finished that one. Or I'm about to finish that. So I thought you should want to hear that. So I think the VAT moment for me has brought a red line under the contradiction of the finance minister's discourse and his fiscal strategy, because they do this trick of equivocation, which I think is important to underscore. And I think people have become aware as they've come to understand the budget a little bit more. And for me, it's still part of the conversation we need to have and focus on, because the trick is this. They'll say, we are doing this to grow the economy. Fiscal consolidation to grow the economy. We're going to cut over here. We're going to cut over there. We're going to cut over here in the name of growing the economy. And this type of Thatcherite economics, Reagan economics, has already been disproven as a solution for growth. So something that has been intriguing to observe is that particular discourse to say, no, we need to do this to cut, we need to fiscally consolidate to grow the economy. But it's not a recipe for growth. Because if you say you're going to cut budgets for the classroom. You're going to cut budgets for hospitals. You're going to cut budgets left, right, and center, right? I keep making that joke about fiasco, TKZ fiasco on the other channel. But that's literally what you produce. You produce a low growth environment while claiming at the whole time that you are doing it in the name of growth. Right? Advocate Mpofu likes to use these metaphors, right? But it's like someone robbing you, right, in the middle of a kasi or at the taxi rank in the name of you prospering. But no, I'm taking this phone so that you can have assets. How am I going to have assets at the same time that you're taking the one asset that I'll be paying Vodacom for the next 2 years for? That's exactly what the finance minister has been doing. And one of my biggest pet peeves with the media is that they've not really pushed back on that type of a narrative and to actually debate the fiscal framework in and of itself and the fiscal strategy to say, hey, why are you actually claiming that all of these things will produce growth? And I saw in Business Live, there was this article where they were saying that Treasury has superior logic. And because they have superior logic or some argument to that effect, we shouldn't ask questions or ask them. But Thatcher has been disproven as being the right fiscal approach for an economy that is growing and has the same challenges that South Africa has. Because even now in the UK, that whole privatization agenda and this, the other contradiction is that they call it, they'll say things like Operation Vulindlela, or opening the way for privatization. But Thatcher tried that, and they've got sewage right now in Thames. Right? It's called Thames Water, that company that provides water in London, some of the dirtiest water in the world. And now you keep hearing them talking about the privatization of water, water ABC, water XYZ. And all of those things, I think, have come to a light. That contradiction, the other contradiction that is worth noting or commenting on is that they are talking about how we need to reduce the debt while taking on debt for IPPs. Did you notice that? Few weeks ago, Ursula von der Leyen came here. She was standing next to President Cyril Ramaphosa, photo opportunity, and they gave it some kind of a name. I can't remember what they called it, but it was a big loan that we're taking from Europe in euros, and it's rated in forex. But they're saying at the same time the debt repayment is going up. We need to do all of these budget things like raise the VAT in order to pay debt. But you just took about 200 billion worth of debt from the EU for IPPs, which are mostly going to benefit Motsepe and friends. So how is that something that is beneficial to South Africa at this moment? And I think the freezing of this particular VAT and all of the concessions that have been made have been critical for everyone to be aware of all of the approaches, the thoughts that are coming from the finance minister.
Let me bring in Qaanitah. And indeed, what I enjoy about your journalism is how easily you take us behind the scenes of what's going on. How do you interpret all that's gone on in the last, shall we just say 3 days? Because if we extend it longer than that,
we'll sit here forever.
Exactly.
Sizwe, just to say thank you for the opportunity, and I hope that Gogo Aubrey recovers. This was his seat, and I'm really grateful to be here, and I hope he does well soon. So I was one of those people that had a really fun 2 months. I was chilled, and I'll tell you why. I don't think we went through a crisis. Yeah. Coalition governments are formed for 2 reasons: to elect a president and to pass a budget. There's no other reason why people must be in coalition. You get rewarded for those 2 big actions with ministerial positions, right?
Sure.
But they needed to elect a president because they couldn't do it themselves, so they got them, and they needed to pass a budget. So as a party, they decided in their own wisdom, and we can talk another day about having a multi-party coalition versus having a grand coalition. President Ramaphosa feels very vindicated today to say, you see why we needed to have others, because we didn't want to be held by the throat by the DA, right? So we can debate that. But essentially, when you walk into a agreement like this, you know what the price is. So you are marrying a cheating polygamist. You know it, right? You asked him to make it exclusive.
I don't know who's the marrying and who's the... everyone is a... Yeah.
You asked him to make it exclusive. He said no, right? Then what you do is you draw a line in the sand and you say, if you cross this line at Bella, we're walking. Nah? Then you don't walk. Then you draw another line in the sand and you say, if you cross the line at expropriation, we're walking. Then you don't walk. Then you say, no. At VAT, we draw the line in the sand, else we're walking. But what you are doing is you are negotiating for a bigger house in Houghton. Nah? So, you don't want to go. You are screaming, you're exposing him at every family event. Right? You're calling him a cheating, but you know he was a cheater. You knew it.
Yeah.
You decided to marry him. He never promised you he's not going to cheat.
In fact, there are 10 partners. By
Right. But then, you made it your red line. You made that VAT increase your red line. No one made it for you. Right? And then you quietly say, but if you jiggy on this and that, we'll forget about that. That is not politics of coalition. That's not debate, because healthy coalition politics is about getting negotiations within the power you have, right? You made it the red line. You ought to have walked away, because you could not do the second of the two things you were rewarded by. You got 13 executive positions. You had to do two things. You had to vote as president, you have to pass a budget. You don't want to pass a budget? Sure, don't pass the budget. But don't demand a big house. Right? And so the principle of whether you for VAT or not VAT, that's your hill to die on. As a nation, we'll clap for you or we won't, right? But when it is presented in this way, right, where there's an NEC meeting, you send a letter to the president and you say, right, the environment is ripe, let's privatize, let's... For what? That's not how coalition... you're asking for something that needs to be tested in the Constitution. Can the president, after assenting to a bill of parliament, just decide because you want to pass a budget to I don't know if the Constitutional Court will allow it, right? Yeah. So let's take emotion out of the room. The ANC did what a cheater does, and they made a stupid policy decision. They said, we're going to increase VAT, right? So it's less about them. We know them, right? It's about you and how you're reacting, right? And so the question now comes that the passing of the budget, they can call it extortion. I don't want to fall into that theatrics, but to say it's not about the budget because you were rewarded, you were given a place in that GNU for a particular outcome. Now, I'll wrap up very quickly, Sizwe. In the beginning of the year, when there was drama around, I think could have been expropriation or maybe a scandal after that, where you get these calls from, people who sit in these investor rooms and everyone wants to know, is the GNU going to fall apart? I said at the time, and I say it now, the incentive to be in the GNU is more than the incentive to be out. And I'll tell you why. Because opposition politics has not worked, because the election results shows the top four parties reduced their share, or the DA stagnated. So saying the ANC is bad doesn't win you votes. So all you have to do is you have to go and audition there in government, right? So you have to go there and you have to act like you're busy and you're showing. And so it's an audition to be part of. And the person who understands that is one Gayton McKenzie, right? It's an audition here. I'm not here. And he humbles himself. He humbles himself in front of the president because he knows that I need this to build my voter base come the next election. Sorry, I'm just going a bit longer, but I'll wrap up now. So the DA has no incentive to leave. It's bad politics. You got to show in to show the country what you're able to do. 2026 is next year. What do you have that hasn't worked before? The only thing you have is this, and that's why they've taken it with such vigor to ask the Minister of Home Affairs. He understands it, right? Now, the question is this. The argument that you cannot support a budget but you can remain in government is the most absurd argument you could ever have. There is no government without a budget. You wanted to break the government. So now there's no government. So go leave the government, right? On the ANC side, right, 2 weeks ago I wrote a column where I said, this VAT thing's not going to happen. I'll tell you why. The confidence that I had was not based on, I don't know what was happening with Mr. Mashaba and the negotiations. But I understood two things. One, it was never going to be the hill that they died on, right? It's too risky. And secondly, you still need, you can't edge yourself into a corner where you are at the mercy of other political parties. Right. What they avoided that time. So essentially, the ANC did what it did, what it thought was the best thing to do. But the ANC, for whatever reason it may be, is not willing to kick the DA out.
Let me see how you react to that, Tessa, because Qaanitah has taken us into the way that VAT interfaces with the deeper coalition dynamics themselves. And of course, this VAT thing is symptomatic of a deeper coalition. Crisis has become the norm, so I don't even know whether to say crisis anymore. But we've had this coalition announce itself, and then we've had, weeks where there's this question of will it survive, will it not, and it clutches its way back to survival, and then there's another crisis. Where do you think we are in this coalition story right now?
So if you didn't catch the 10 a.m. Press conference yesterday morning, welcome to your new coalition. It is a coalition when it works. When it actually gets things done, when it actually sets agendas, sets priorities, and actually gets things done. And the thing that you and I said on SMWX right at the beginning of this is we are waiting for this government of national unity to not just be a government in name or united in name, but to give us a program of action. The first problem, and it wasn't a problem of their making, was we have a constitutional problem where we only have 14 days to form a government. We have to get rid of that problem. You cannot be a multi-party constitution for 30 years. But it was an ANC person who arrogantly thought they would never be in the position to have to negotiate a government that made it 14 days. We have to reverse that. And there's a bigger electoral reform conversation that goes along with that. But now you're in that situation. And instead of saying, okay, we're going to find a minimum reason why we're going to come together, they come up with a statement of intent that is waffly, that is flowery, and that is really written to conceal what the DA really wanted, which was to nail the ANC into a corner and give itself veto power.
Yes.
That's the reason why Helen Zille will not tell you about any other clause except the clause about sufficient consensus. Because that's what it was about for them. They want to be the number one wife. They want to be the one that matters only. And what that tells you about the DA is that they didn't care about what the real work was. They cared about their power. But the same is true for the ANC. Because the ANC didn't push back and say, actually, what are the real issues that we need to deal with here? They went with this laundry list of things, and everybody was negotiating for power. The second thing is that now that you have a coalition formed, why have they not sat down in a room together and actually come up with a minimum program of action?
10 months in.
It takes other governments around the world 6 months to negotiate a minimum program of action before they even say who's going to be minister of what. In the last 10 months, other than grandstand, what have they actually done to show us that there's a plan of action here?
We did it the other way around. We gave everyone positions and then we're like, oh, well, we don't need a program now.
And then this budget thing, the most disappointing thing is, a budget is not created the month before SONA or after SONA. The budget precedes SONA. SONA doesn't inform the budget. The budget process started in June last year. They have had all the time in the world to sit down and actually bust out a budget that they all agreed on by the 19th of February. I do not believe that government of national unity exists. I can't imagine what a cabinet meeting is like because I don't believe they talk to each other.
Can I jump in here? That actually the cabinet meetings are like really, really cordial. And that John Steenhuisen is actually quite amenable in those meetings if you believe some of those ministers, right? And that the ministers actually vibe with ANC ministers vibing with Leon Schreiber and actually help Sivue Warube when she has problems with MECs in other provinces. I wish I was joking, right? So it's actually not as adversarial as you think, which for me is indicative that you just wanted in.
Yeah.
You never thought beyond it, right? And so that's why your fights are public and not actually like in the room.
Yeah.
Let me bring in Mighti here just to react to some of the things that have been said, because we went VAT. We heard from Mr. Mashaba a lot of that context, and now we're deep into GNU territory. GNU. And what, where do you think this is going based on what you've heard here now?
Well, I think there's going to be a remix, a 2.0 of this coalition at some point. The DA, I think, has a strategy to have an exit from the coalition after the elective conference of the ANC. So whoever wins, whether it's Mbalula, Mashatile, whoever, Panyaza, they just want to say, no, this guy, we don't trust this guy, we're out of here, and then the election begins for them. So that's why they're trying to hold on until the elective conference. But as things are playing out, obviously the ANC is very savvy. They spend a lot of time focused on these kind of scenario plans, etc. The biggest misconception we sometimes have of the ANC or cadres or whatever the case may be is that they're incompetent, because we measure their performance based on what we experience in the clinic, in the police station, in the school. But if you look at the way these guys are living, they're living lavish lives. Everything is perfect in their houses. They have all of the megabytes for downloads and uploads, right? They have Jojo tanks and all manner of solar installations. As soon as Tesla makes a power wall, there's a cadre who has it. So what I'm trying to say is that they spend all of their brain capacity either finding ways to creatively skim from the state and also finding ways to drain the state, but also to live these lavish lives. But the other brain power that they spend their time on is the scheming, the wheeling and the dealing to try to figure out how do we stay in power and how do we navigate these things, which is why I think Mr. Mashaba negotiated very aggressively and was able to get himself in a position where his party could then have this kingmaker role. But I also think that they were looking for somebody that they could work with, and they were planning around what can they do to keep that 201 votes within the National Assembly. So what I'm trying to say is, as things look right now, while the DA is trying to get out after elective conference of the ANC, because that can be the biggest dramatic moment for them, they go to big business and they say, look at Mashatile, Panyaza, Mbalula, whoever it is, can you work with this guy? Give us the 100 million you gave us last time. We'll get the 30%. Remember our poll from the institute that Helen Zille went to after she left the DA and then went back to the DA. Anyway, it's a real poll. We're getting 30+%, whatever the case may be. So that's their scenario. But it seems to me clear right now that the ANC is already preparing for 2.0. Yesterday, Mdumiseni Ntuli was very... Clement Manyatela moved ahead in the interview. I don't know if you guys picked it up, but Mdumiseni was saying we need to hear from the DA why they are behaving like this. We're going to meet them tomorrow, etc. The statement which eventually came out under Fikile Mbalula's name was very conciliatory. We want unity, etc., etc. But that tone there from Mdumiseni Ntuli yesterday, to me, indicated that the ANC is now alive to the fact that they cannot actually stay with the DA until elective conference. They need to make a GNU 2.0. So I think it may not happen now. Mr. Mashaba may not want to be part of that particular formulation, but I do think that it's in the making now. And ANC likes to foreshadow what they want to do so that they can say, why are you panicking? We've been speaking about this for months. If you've noticed anything that is done by the ANC, it's always how, but we've been speaking about Expropriation Act for 20 years. We've been speaking about NHI. NHI is not new. Expropriation Act is not new. Everything is like, this is old. Why are you panicking? Why are you reacting like this? So that's exactly what's going to happen with the GNU, because they're going to say at some point when the two-step process seems to be now that they want to include more people, make the door, the access point easier so that anybody can say, I'm in GNU, I signed, I don't want to be in cabinet or whatever. Then one day, all of a sudden, there's going to be a cabinet announcement, a reshuffle, and some names may end up in the cabinet. So I think it's coming, it's inevitable. But I want to make this final contribution because I'm thinking about the contributions that have been made. There's no conviction, which is why there are no fights in the cabinet. Right? The person who has conviction on the vision is Helen Zille, but she's not always in the room. And even Tony Leon in his new book was talking about when the negotiations were happening, they got an SMS saying that Helen wants to take charge and take leadership. And he was very unhappy with that. So she's the brain trust right now. And she's not in the room. So you're not going to see the friction that you would typically see in the room. But I think that's why you're not seeing the emotion. People are enjoying the SUVs, they're enjoying the VIP status, and it is nice. I wouldn't say that I wouldn't enjoy it either. So that's I don't know. I'll have to see when I get it.
Making a pitch for a Pace car rental car now.
Pace, hook me up.
No.
So I think that's why you're not seeing those particular fights, right? But I do think that there's no conviction, but the point around there not being a medium-term plan is an important point because what it means for ordinary South Africans, for everybody on the ground, is that this is political theater at its finest, but it's not going to change the condition in a classroom. It's not going to change the condition in a police station. It's not going to change the position in a clinic because there's no plan, there's no ideology, there's no vision, there's no conviction, and it's going to be status quo minors because all of the things that we're used to, which is inefficiencies and failures and performances. So the minister will say, I've removed pit toilets, but those pit toilets were being removed anyway, and they're just updated to what they call VIPs, which are ventilated pit toilets. So you move from one version of pit toilet to another version of pit toilet. The minister does a press conference, says, I've removed pit toilets, when 97% of the schools in the Eastern Capes don't have a library. Grade 4s can't read. We've got 33% as the median mark in mathematics, right? So those are the realities, but the minister can tick the boxes. So this GNU chat, in the back of our minds, we have to think, what does it actually mean for the police station, the clinic, and the hospitals and home affairs?
Let me bring you in again, Qaanitah, because you have been a very close observer of the Ramaphosa presidency. And we've discussed the VAT situation, how it relates to the broader coalition dynamics. What do you think what has been said here reflects on the Ramaphosa presidency, and where are we in this presidency right now?
So, President Ramaphosa, which you'd have seen it yesterday as well with the Zelensky visit, loves the idea of being someone that can have convening power, bring people into a room together. He's really good at it. It's possibly one of his greatest strengths. If I was him, I would have made a bid for UN Secretary General versus a president of a country. I'll tell you why. Because as a president, it's inconsequential if you can bring people into a room. You have to make a decision.
The room has to act.
The room has to act.
Yeah.
And so what you're seeing, the president of the GNU versus the president of the ANC post-Nasrec 1 is the same president, which is an indecisive president. Why do you need, how many months was it to nominate people for a deputy chief justice? That's a small thing, you know? And I mean, we can list the indecision, right? And so in a situation like this, the fruit of his attitude and his leadership comes in the sense that, look, we had to have a multi-party government because, see, we're not being held ransom by one party, right, in a grand coalition. So I understand that bit. But when it comes to leadership, it's more of the same, right? And so for me, what we're seeing here is systemic of two things. One, we believe that the ANC has a monopoly on factional politics, but their factionalism only mattered because they only had power. The DA, my dear, they now know what factionalism is. There's going to be slate politics in the DA. Why? Because there's power on the table. And so these movements, this jiggy that you hear from cabinet ministers, from those outside, from some advisors sitting in other polling institutions, we won't name them. But the thing is, power is at stake now. And once you have it, it's hard to let go. And so, as consequential as an ANC elective conference, a DA elective conference is going to matter in this GNU, right?
2026, I think.
And the second thing is, this is all systemic of what Tessa spoke about, a failed and flawed system. You have a clearinghouse mechanism that's supposed to resolve disputes by a deputy president who, A, doesn't command that level of respect among his peers, but also who is, we almost know where he stands on some of the GNU partners, right? What you need in a situation like this is, which is why in Germany or in Europe, in some coalition agreements, that they take weeks on only fighting and negotiating about how to conflict resolution, because that process will determine how you act in a GNU. It's not up for today. It can't be murky that the ANC says, "Oh, we won't divorce you, you leave," and then the DA says, "We won't divorce you, you leave, you chuck us out." You know, that drama, because there would be a when Tessa and Lukona and others screamed on the top of their voices about electoral reform, we were laughing. We were playing with our toes. You don't understand how dangerous of a system we have, and what it means to not have effective coalition to govern this, effective legislation to govern coalition politics. It is bad in Maluti Apofong, it's bad in Tshwane, it's bad in the national government.
The Ramaphosa presidency.
You know, guys, we've had an array of presidents who have shown us their best and their worst. Even Nelson Mandela gave us glimpses of both, if you were paying attention. I find him to be one of the most dangerous presidents we have. And his danger is in his inaction and in his quiet demeanor. Somebody was saying today, the president plays cupcake really well. And he likes playing cupcake, right? Because being amenable and being likable and all of that keeps him out of the firing line of many South Africans.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, we have become the frog in the pot. And since 2018, the pot has slowly been boiling. So those indicators that Jamie's been listing, they've gotten worse and worse and worse. But because it's not a Zuma presidency, where you feel like the president's coming at things with a sledgehammer, there's nobody shouting because there's no ruckus. There's no sledgehammer. It's this quiet boiling over of crisis after crisis after crisis. And we are being lulled into a sense that there's nothing that can be done. My sense about the Ramaphosa presidency is that he's biding his time, that he wants to get out with his hands clean, that he's not making decisions so he doesn't have to make a bad decision, and that his legacy is not tarnished. I think he cares more about how history remembers him than actually what he does. And I worry about that. It really does keep me up at night. For me, the other part of this goes to this electoral reform question. Because when it comes to how we engage with our politicians, we are engaging on the basis that they will allow us to. So we only go as far as they will allow us to. The politicians, the parties, etc. Because we don't have any power to do anything about them. So whether they do something or whether they do nothing, we are spectators on the sidelines of our own politics. The way you elect is the way you govern, and it's the way you hold accountable. If we continue to elect in the way that we do, that hands over all of our power of accountability to the party bosses who are also doubling up as the people who are in government, we're going to have a problem. We are one of the few countries in the world where our political logic is that there are no two centers of power. Donald Trump is not the head of the Republican Party. There is an actual head of the Republican Party, and there's the candidate for the Republican nomination. We say those two must be the same. But the problem is, then you are now the only person who can hold you accountable. That's the reason we only have recalls of presidents once the president is no longer the party leader. We have no accountability because we've got a system that keeps us out and doubles and triples their power. And we can't change it because we're asking the turkeys to vote for Christmas.
So get your questions ready. I'm going to come to Mighti on the same question of where we are in this presidency, and then we'll open it up to the audience. Your thoughts on where we are with President Ramaphosa?
So I actually take a slightly different view on President Ramaphosa. I think that he's very active on the priorities that he has. So if you think about youth employment, youth summit, all of those things, the outcomes have been negligible at best and definitely underwhelming for the extent of the problem, right? Unemployment between 15 and 24 is at 70%, according to the expanded definition, right? At 25 to 34, it's at 50%. So those numbers are not great, and it's a 60% average because there's more or less 1 million per year, 16, 18, etc. So 60% is something that is never going to achieve the growth that you want to achieve. And there's been no aggressive implementation of any changes to the classroom, even with ChatGPT and all of these technological advancements that we're seeing. No real appetite, ambition, or urgency. However, if you think about every state of the nation, if you've watched them or read the speeches, the transcripts, whatever, there's always a discussion about infrastructure and infrastructure spending. That money always goes out. And you know, I was reading recently Dead Aid by Dambisa Moyo, rereading it for the book club that we have. And one of the things she says in passing is one of the easiest ways to siphon money out of a developmental state is through infrastructure spending, because the results are so down the road that people begin to pick up who the winners and losers are, who the blessers become, like 10 years after the fact. And that person is already established, and then you're chasing them down, and then people are dying in courts, etc., etc. You'll find out later who the winners are. But that infrastructure spend, and even now there was that discussion in the questions to the president where the DA was asking, but isn't this money going to go to funny places, you know, the PIC money that is now going to be spent on, and the pensions that are going to be spent on the infrastructure spending, what is it, 1 trillion over the next X amount of years? Is that money going to go where it's supposed to go for roads, etc.? So there's action there. He loves big infrastructure projects. He loves this network infrastructure stuff because he's a big man and he wants to be involved in big business and big deals. But part of my concern is that in aggressively pursuing that, there's not really been a protection from the cancer of corruption in the implementation of that. The other place where you've seen a lot of activity, you know, there's this initial REIPP, Renewable Energy Independent Producer Plan, whatever the act is called. That was accelerated through Parliament. They wrote laws, and they wrote laws that enabled certain people to be able. So when they take that loan, by the way, from Europe or America for the Just Energy Transition Plan, that loan is taken by the government, right? That money is then given to whoever shows up and says, I want to build renewable energy where to save the environment. All of these billionaires who are mining all across Africa and being sued in some countries for environmental destruction, they all care about the environment, right? And then they get this money. And if you've looked at most of the sonars, you will hear report backs, bid window 5, bid window. Have you seen? Sometimes it's the boring part of the speech. You'll say, now we've done bid window 5. Bid window 5 has been approved. These guys now have IPPs are moving, etc., etc. There has been consistent action in delivery of IPPs and IPP money, even though 80% of the energy that is generated by Eskom is still coming from coal, right? And I think another 10% is coming from the open combustion. A very small amount is coming from the IPP space. And I love the environment, love animals. Don't get the wrong message from me, right? Africa is not a major polluter on the global scene, but South Africa has played an overly large role in taking money for this just energy transition stuff in a way that is disproportionate to the need. So what I'm trying to put across is inaction on education. If you go to pick a clinic, right, clinic in Piri, and ask them, has your clinic improved? Not really. But if you look at the areas where there's been a focus, the infrastructure projects, this renewable energy independent power producer plan program, that REIPPP, that one, you will see a lot of action. So I do think that there's been a disposition and a temperament where he's positioned himself as, I'm a consensus builder, I listen to all the people in the room, I'll take a long time to choose the Chief Justice, I may not even be the one who wants to make that decision. But if you look at that Operation Vulindlela and everything associated there, and some of the winners and losers, I mean, Rupert has got an energy exchange now, Motsepe is a big player in that space, over half of the renewable energy contracts in one of the bid windows went to the Imkamva Consortium, which is one company which has roots in a colonial project in Britain, BICC, or whatever the name of that company is. If you look at all of that and you break it down,
right,
one side action, one side inaction.
Sure. Okay, we're going to open up for a round of questions. I think let's take 3 hands, and we'll come back to our panelists. Again, if you can just try and be brief, and also appeal to the panelists in your responses to be brief, so we can take one more round after that.
Hi, everyone. My name is Selokela Slu Molamudi. A big thank you to the SMWX team for such a great discussion. I just want to find out.
Where are you? Sorry.
I'm over
we
here.
We actually can't see.
At the back.
Okay,
Genuinely
great.
can't see.
Yeah, right. Welcome. Thank you.
Right. So I just want to find out from the panelists, and I know everyone in the room will roll their eyes when I say we are a resilient nation as South Africans, but we are.
We are.
And I just want to find out from you guys then, how do we revive the hope and activism on the ground so that we are no longer spectators, like Tessa highlighted? That's a question for all 3 of you.
Thank you so much. Great question. Yeah, I think let's take the 3 in this row, and then we'll come back to another round after that.
Oh, it's me.
Yes, Petani.
Yes.
Okay. How did you see me?
I saw you long ago.
Okay.
We don't see you anymore, but...
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, so this is Petani, some fellow from Venda. So there where I come from, this evil practice of dismembering people when they're still alive, you know? It's called Uvia, so it's very common. Even in the village close to mine, it was done recently. But the analogy that I'm trying to draw into is that that's what the ANC has been doing on the state, dismembering the states by themselves. So now they've found partners to be able to work together on that. But the problem is that there's the conflict of interest of where do we start? Do we start with the hand? Do we start with the head? Which part of the body do we dismember first? And these interests are mostly shown in the contest that the DA has on the interests of the state, being the person that they're killing. So as Tessa was speaking, and also Jamie plus and Qaanitah, on how the inaction of the current government that we have in the so-called GNU, which is the genuine name. So what really could be the correct political imagination that we can see to try to reimagine a future in which the state is not being dismembered while still alive. Thanks.
Great. I've been informed that we've actually run out of time largely. and there is food awaiting. So, Lukhona, I think we're going to take you as the last person to ask a question. We'll then just have some final concluding thoughts. So you can make a comment. You don't have to answer all the questions exhaustively.
Thanks, Sizwe. I just wanted to make sure that my name is not used in vain. My name is Lukhona Mnguni. And I'm very grateful for your timekeeping because Orlando Pirates is playing soon. And Sundowns is about to win on away goal.
Absolutely. And on the weekend, Liverpool
1-1.
will then win the league. So we need to watch that too. So
it's a very big weekend. I want to start with Qaanitah's analogy because it's instructive. In customary law, Undlunkulu, both in custom and now in our case law, actually does have significant rights that can be eroded by the cheating husband. And the truth is that the only party that had an input in the text of the statement of intent is the DA, outside of the ANC. And I think we must not be led by the emotions of politicians to understand the reality of what is at play currently. My biggest fear is that the GNU is further eroding the role of parliament.
Mm-hmm.
And the reversal of the VAT is highly possibly unconstitutional and unlawful at the point in time as we speak. Everybody can play along. It's fine to play along with the VAT reversal. The question of legality, how you remove a bill that you've already introduced, which part of the law you are relying on, and what aspects of the law become null and void, and what is the meaning of resolutions of parliament. The fiscal framework and revenue proposals are adopted by the National Council of Provinces and the National Assembly. There is a reason for that. Nobody wants to account what is the role of the fiscal framework and revenue proposals as we sit here today. And how can you revoke a resolution of parliament outside of parliament at some hotel through a press briefing that took place yesterday? The second thing, Sizwe, that I want to say, because I'm really worried. I've just seen, nicely, I'm in an MK group. I'm in many WhatsApp groups. Advocate, I just shocked you.
exactly. Well, this is the MK podcast. So
yeah. I mean, even Jamie once tried on an MK shirt. I don't know I would have the guts to do that. MK is supposedly saying it's doing something that's accountability, but again, it's an unconstitutional thing. They have submitted a motion of no confidence on the Minister of Finance. You can't submit a motion of no confidence on a single cabinet member. Section 102 of the Constitution is very clear. It's either on cabinet or the president. So I'm worried about where we are. I'm significantly worried about where South Africa is. And politics preceding lawfulness. And I'm not sure what your panel has to say about this. And lastly, Sizwe, the point, we are here because of the attitude and conduct of Minister Kodongwana, not the DA. You can't surprise your cabinet colleagues. The fact that everybody had flown into Cape Town on the 19th of February and was ready for 2 p.m. for the minister to deliver the budget. But he informed cabinet and GNU members of the 2% VAT increase hours before delivering the budget. That's the real crisis point here. And what we need to question is whether the role of National Treasury as it currently sits is duty fit. Because yes, budgeting starts elsewhere and you walk the path. But where the revenue comes from, the cabinet itself was informed hours before. Otherwise, they wouldn't have flown into Cape Town.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Lukhona. Shout out to you as well as another friend of SMWX. I think the only reason you probably didn't end up on this panel was we weren't 100% sure whether you'd be able to. Yeah, we didn't know if you'd be in your MK group or here. So. Look, we've heard a lot of interesting interventions. I think all we can do now is 2-minute final reflections on your thoughts. Let us, in this Freedom Day event, then liberate our audience to go and eat, drink, and be merry. So, final reflections in 2 minutes.
I'm gonna make you go and find this for yourself. There's a current MP that says, the politicians have eaten, it's time for the people to eat. Famously. And it's one of my favorite political quotes at the moment. But I am going to address each one, but in the shortest way I can possibly do it. Lukwana, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. That is the political context in which we are in. We want the glory without the work. And that's why I was lamenting the fact that there's been this entire process of months. And it's only on the day of that anyone can do anything about anything. I think the issue that you raise about the constitutionality is most pressing for the DA. Because right now the DA is happy to celebrate a decision that they have just gone to court to declare unconstitutional.
Yes.
Our problem is going to start on the 29th of April. Because if the court comes back and says the DA was right, we are all sakakid. We are all inside. And this is again why Parliament always needed to be held to a higher standard. These are your lawmakers. How many of us even know how to name more than 10 of them if they are not a minister? We need to do better knowing who our parliamentarians are, knowing what their work is, and asking them to do their damn jobs. That's the only response I have for you, Lux. On the question about cutting up the state while it's still alive, one of the issues with the Ramaphosa presidency that I didn't name earlier is the wanton hollowing out of the state and delegating of his powers to anyone who will come. Somebody asked me, who's the president listening to? I said, the last person he spoke to. Because he will give away his delegated powers to anyone, it would seem. And I really think that we need to start asking ourselves questions. Why do we have 31 different commissions? Why do we have small project management desks in the office? Why do we not have well thought through and well-defined ministries? And why are we not investing into the state the best possible minds and resources this country has to offer? If you look at the names on those commissions of the president, he clearly knows the best minds. They're just not paid in the state on a regular basis. They're being paid over and above the people whose jobs they're doing. We truly must not give up on the state. And we must not allow politicians to use the state just to leak out money to their friends who don't actually want to do the work on a daily basis. The last question I have to answer from SLU, because it's my daily job, getting this country to take itself seriously from the bottom up. As citizens, we must remember that democracy means that the people shall govern themselves, not the government shall govern. And so we must ask ourselves, how do we start governing on a day-to-day basis? How do we start taking action? How do we start using our own power on a daily basis? How do we start questioning systems when they keep us out? We are a disorganized society. And I'm going to ask us to start organizing ourselves. Political parties get things right because they organize. Let's start organizing ourselves so that we can have more power, more opportunities so that we can press back and push back. But we have to start taking ourselves seriously as the citizens.
Thanks so much, Tessa. 2 minutes. Go ahead.
All right. So I've got a timer. Let me get it going. So I think one of the things that is important to think about when thinking about the statement of intent and the deal between the DA and others and the ANC is whether or not it's a contract in and of itself, Lukhona. And I think that's why it's called a statement of intent. And I just pulled up my law notes here quickly. I'm going to go through it, right? Contracts are agreements between parties who have an intention to create legal rights and duties between both of the parties. And one of the elements there is that you need agreement, you need consensus, you need a meeting of the minds. I don't think there's actually been a meeting of the minds between the DA and the ANC and the other members of the coalition around what actually does this document mean. Because I think you're right that it was perhaps more drafted by the DA, and they were so gleeful that they got Section 19, and we've got this, provision that allows us to then veto everything. So I don't think it's a contract, and particularly if you think about when you look at Pacta di Contrahendo, I hope my law lecturer is proud today. It's an agreement to make a contract in the future. And I think that's what the statement of intent was. But there is no agreement. There's no legally enforceable agreement. So I think in principle, the DA is justified to say, but we gave you guys the presidency. You're stepping all over our feet. You're not consulting us. You're not speaking to us. What the hell is going on? And because we know that we can hold you to account on the budget side of things, we are going to really put your feet to the fire. But I don't think there's an agreement. And I do think some of these issues, unfortunately, will have to be solved through the political side. I still got 30 seconds, Sizwe. So the last thing I want to speak about really around Petani's question and a little bit of Slu's question is that we have to shift this demonization of the institution called the state. We all know civil servants. We know teachers. We know nurses. They spend their own money. They sacrifice. They come home late. They do all manner of overtime to make sure that South Africans can get a little bit of service. They do their very best and they bleed on the front lines, but they're not capacitated. There's a lot of corruption at the top, a lot of inefficiency in middle management. But the reality is that the state is a necessary actor and the civil service does need to be supported and capacitated in a way that you will see real delivery. This narrative that the DA has been using and that is used by neoliberals around the world so that they can push for privatization is one that we ought to challenge with the contemporary economic thinking and really not allow, because certain people have a particular race that they know better economics, they know better about business, they know better about the role of the state. We have to challenge that thinking. We have to capacitate. And by the way, you can have the best roads. You can have the best. I know. So I went a little bit over. Just 50 seconds over. Just give me 10 more seconds. So what I want to say is that the best roads and the best minds are not going to improve the economy in the township or the rural areas. There needs to be an investment in those classrooms. There needs to be an investment in people. The last 31 years, all of the discourse has been around these macroeconomic priorities. But moving forward, we really need to say, how are you investing in human potential and the people on the ground? That's what every developed nation is doing around the world.
Yeah. Absolutely. Give it up for Mighti Jamie, everyone. Qaanitah, you have 10 seconds.
Sorry.
Because Jamie stole from me.
It's okay. Expropriate without compensate.
Don't leave the GNU, please.
Look, I just want to say to you that you are 100% right in saying that the problem started with the finance minister, but it's symptomatic of the ANC's amnesia that it lost power, right? So they just approached budget as they always would have. And that's, you would think the president would have been reminded to say, hey, we can't have the same process because we are not the governing party. Because you'd remember, there used to be a finance minister, Tito Mboweni, who used to fight with even the Thuli House and with the NEC to say, hey, as Treasury, we tell you how money is spent. And so there was this untouchable thing about the Treasury's budget office. And so that same attitude walked into the room. And so the DA was doing its role in withdrawing in budget one. That's what the DA was doing was great. When it did what it did on that weekend of the NEC, that's when things went. I think I started the conversation a bit late to say that concession that the finance minister put us in this. Of course, you forgot that you've lost power really. So that's an old conversation, right? And then just to wrap up by saying two things. One, the conversation about reform of the system is one you guys all have to go out and take it wherever you are. It's a boring conversation. But guys, we're going to see this over and over and over again. And the second thing is that this world, we coalitions is not going to go away. And so we can't wish it away. And what coalitions need from us is our participation. We outsource politics to the politicians. It didn't work. We then took it back. Now we have to do something with this power that we have as people. So let's just do something with it. Thank you.
Give it up for our excellent panel, everyone.